Welcome to another deep dive for the Simplified Summary YouTube channel. We are really excited to get into today's topic.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic one.
Yeah. And hey, if you're someone who loves extracting brilliant, life-altering insights from classic literature, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button,
Please do.
like this video, and drop your thoughts in the comments to help our community grow. Today, we're unpacking a remarkably complex short story by the legendary Hindi author Munshi Premchand.
Right. The story is Chamatkar.
Exactly. Which translates to The Miracle. And this is extracted from his celebrated Mansarovar Part 2 collection. Now, just to set the stage for you listening, this isn't a fantasy tale about divine intervention or, magic wands.
Not at all.
The mission of this deep dive is to look at the miraculous and sometimes terrifying shifts that occur within the human moral compass. We're following a desperate young man pushed to the absolute brink by a suffocating mix of poverty, societal expectations, and just an unbearable temptation.
And it leads to a single fateful decision with profound consequences.
Right.
It's a phenomenal piece of literature because Premchand is a master at exploring that intersection of systemic inequality and personal morality. And why this matters to you right now is that while the story is set in a specific historical era, the underlying themes are timeless.
Totally timeless.
We're dealing with deep financial anxiety, the glaring psychological effects of a rigid class divide, and the crushing weight of compromising your own core values. These are conflicts people navigate daily.
Yeah, they really are.
As we examine this protagonist's journey, I want to pose a question directly to you, the listener. What would you do if a life-changing amount of wealth was suddenly left completely unguarded in your hands?
Oh, man. That is the ultimate question. Okay, let's unpack this by starting with our protagonist, Chandra Prakash.
Let's do it.
He's a young man who has just achieved a major milestone. He passed his BA examinations. And in the context of the era, a BA was supposed to be a golden ticket to the elite class.
It was a huge deal.
But instead of launching a glorious career, his life just collapses. Yeah. His father, who had a high-ranking position, unexpectedly passes away.
And leaves behind absolutely no property and no savings.
Nothing. So suddenly, Prakash inherits this immense burden of providing for his highly educated, sophisticated wife, Champa. She's accustomed to a certain standard of living.
She really is. She's the kind of person who would rather endure silent misery than lower herself to eating coarse food or wearing cheap clothes.
Exactly. And that gap between expectation and reality is the engine of the entire story. All of Prakash's grand dreams of securing a prestigious job through his late father's network are completely shattered.
He's forced to accept a meager tutoring position.
Right, that pays just 30 rupees a month.
Which is
barely anything.
exactly. To put that in context for a modern audience, 30 rupees in Premchand's era was barely enough to buy basic grains for the month. It is absolute subsistence living.
And he's tutoring the son of a wealthy aristocrat, Thakur Sahib.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the sheer irony of the class dynamics at play. Despite Prakash's abject poverty, Thakur Sahib treats him with an immense amount of reverence.
Yeah, the text notes that this reverence stems largely from the language barrier. Thakur Sahib doesn't know any English.
Oh, right.
So he views this English-knowing BA graduate as an intellectual superior, almost like a sage or a guru. He consults Prakash on every single household matter, big or small.
Which creates an incredibly painful psychological trap for Prakash.
How so?
Well, he's walking a tightrope between two worlds. On one hand, he enjoys the social status, the absolute trust, and the respect of an equal within this wealthy household. But on the other hand...
He has the bank account of a servant.
Exactly. He spends his days surrounded by opulent wealth he can never touch, respected by people whose lifestyle he can never afford.
That cognitive dissonance is just a breeding ground for profound internal resentment.
Absolutely.
And that resentment isn't just internal, it's deeply echoed in his home by Champa. She is incredibly frustrated by their poverty. The tipping point arrives when Thakur Sahib's son's wedding approaches.
It's going to be a massive, lavish affair.
Huge. And Champa, point blank, refuses to attend. She tells Prakash she has no decent clothes and absolutely no jewelry to wear among those rich aristocrats. She basically says she would rather pretend to be violently ill than face that kind of social humiliation.
You can really feel the claustrophobia of Prakash's situation there. He is caught between a wealthy employer who trusts him implicitly and a deeply unhappy wife whose social humiliation is a constant reminder of his failure as a provider.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the ultimate temptation. Thakur Sahib, displaying that blind trust we mentioned, gives Prakash total control over the wedding arrangement.
He hands him a massive budget.
Right.
Yes.
10 to 12,000 rupees. If we're looking for a modern anchor, think of that as handing someone who makes minimum wage a briefcase containing $1 million in cash with zero oversight.
That is a staggering amount of temptation. And here's where it gets really interesting. Prakash is put in charge of buying the jewelry for the bride, and he spends 5,000 rupees on these exquisite, glittering ornaments.
A huge sum.
He comes home that night, but instead of being proud of his logistical accomplishment, he vents to Champa about the gross injustice of the world. He complains about how people like the Thakur hoard immense wealth, inheriting it without doing any real labor, while people like them struggle just to put bread on the table.
He's rationalizing.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. Doesn't he have a point? He is doing all the intellectual and administrative labor to make this wedding happen, while the Thakur just sits on his inherited status.
Yeah.
Isn't Prakash somewhat justified in feeling that the system is rigged against him?
He absolutely has a valid critique of the systemic inequality, and that's precisely why Premchand's writing is so brilliant. Prakash isn't a mustache-twirling villain. He's a highly intelligent man using a very real societal injustice to construct a framework of moral licensing.
He's convincing himself it's okay.
Right. He is methodically rationalizing a crime before he even commits it. He tells Champa that the rich have no true generosity, pointing out that despite all of Prakash's tireless work managing this massive wedding, Thakur Sahib didn't even think to give Champa a single modest piece of jewelry.
Wow.
By convincing himself that the Thakur lacks a generous spirit and doesn't morally deserve his hoarded wealth, Prakash subtly gives himself permission to balance the scales of justice.
It's the classic Robin Hood justification, except he's the only one benefiting.
Exactly.
That rationalization leads us right to the actual fall. The night of the theft is an incredibly tense, visceral scene in the source text. It's midnight, and Prakash is lying in bed, completely unable to sleep.
The temptation is literally keeping him awake.
Yeah, he is haunted by the image of those glittering jewels sitting next door, sharply contrasted in his mind with the image of Champa's bare, unadorned arms. Finally, he gets out of bed, and the physical layout of their environment is crucial here.
They live right next door, right?
Yes, they live right next door to the Thakur, and the roofs of their houses are connected, separated only by a low 5-foot wall. Prakash climbs up, crosses this wall, which serves as both a literal property line and a profound metaphorical boundary of his morality, and sneaks into Thakur Sahib's house.
He crosses the line.
He takes the box containing the 5,000 rupees worth of jewelry and slips back over the wall.
The transition from an aggrieved, underpaid intellectual to an active thief is complete.
Completely.
But the real torture begins the very next morning. The chaos that erupts in the Thakur household is palpable. Thakur Sahib and his wife are completely devastated. And this is where Premchand turns the psychological screws.
Oh, this part is brutal.
The Thakurane is weeping, and through her tears, she laments how incredibly hard Prakash worked. She cries about how Prakash spent months running around the city, carefully selecting every single piece of that jewelry, and now some terrible thief has ruined all of his beautiful work.
That is a brilliant use of dramatic irony. The Thakurane's praise actually becomes his psychological torture chamber. Every time she compliments his dedication, she's unknowingly stabbing him in his conscience.
That's a perfect way to describe it. The external crime, hopping a 5-foot wall and grabbing an unguarded box, was shockingly, almost terrifyingly easy. But the internal punishment is immediate and brutal.
Right.
Prakash has to actively perform innocence while drowning in guilt. He has to stand there, wearing the mask of a trusted advisor, comforting the very people he just robbed. The disconnect between his public persona as a respected scholar and his private reality as a petty thief creates a suffocating tension.
But as unbearable as that tension with his employer is, it is nothing compared to the mirror of morality waiting for him back home. The true conflict in this story isn't between Prakash and the police, or even Prakash and the Thakur.
No, it's between Prakash and his wife.
No, exactly. Champa discovers the truth. She sees the stolen jewelry, and she immediately pieces together what he's done. Now, you might assume that a wife who just declared she'd rather fake an illness than be seen without jewelry would be thrilled to suddenly have a fortune in gold.
Regardless of where it came from.
Right. But her reaction is the exact opposite. Instead of joy or relief, she is overcome with deep, overwhelming disgust.
Because she sees right through the elaborate socioeconomic rationalizations he was building the night before. She recognizes that this isn't a noble act of rebellion against the class divide. It's a profound moral failure.
And she delivers this chilling, piercing line of dialogue that completely stops Prakash in his tracks. She looks at him coldly and says, "A person's intentions don't always remain the same."
Oof. That quote strips away any illusion Prakash had that he was acting as a noble provider. He thought he was solving their marital tension, but he actually destroyed the very foundation of their mutual respect.
It backfired entirely.
Completely. Premchand uses a highly evocative metaphor in the source text to describe this moment. He compares Prakash's secret guilt to an infected boil.
An infected boil.
Yeah. For days, this boil has been swelling, filling with the toxic, pressurized secret of his hidden sin. But when Champa looks at him with that silent, judgmental gaze and delivers that cold line, it's as if she takes a sharp scalpel and lances that infected boil.
Wow.
The initial psychological pressure is released because the secret is out, but it leaves behind a raw, agonizing wound of shame.
It's such a visceral image.
Right.
It shows that Champa's rejection of the stolen wealth is the absolute turning point of the narrative. She hated their poverty, yes, but she realizes in that moment that her husband's moral corruption is a far heavier burden to bear than an empty bank account.
She loses respect for him.
Completely. Her subsequent lack of affection and her emotional withdrawal make the physical jewelry feel like a massive, crushing stone sitting directly on Prakash's chest. He thought the gold would buy her happiness, but it actually bought her contempt.
And that contempt is what ultimately drives the climax of the story, the true Chamatkar. Prakash simply cannot bear the weight of his own conscience, amplified by his wife's bitter disappointment. The rationalizations have entirely collapsed.
So what does he do?
He makes a definitive choice. He sneaks back into the Thakur's house in the dead of night, carrying the stolen jewelry box. He creeps into the bedroom and places the box right under the bed where the Thakur's son is sleeping. Just puts it right back. And the text gives us this incredibly stark, beautiful detail about his emotional state right after he does this. As Prakash walks back over that connected roof to his own house, he feels an overwhelming euphoria. Premchand writes that he feels as light as if he is flying in the sky on an airplane.
Flying in an airplane.
Yeah, that massive crushing stone of sin and guilt is completely gone. He has literally and figuratively unburdened himself.
It's the pure euphoria of redemption. He hasn't gained a single rupee. He is just as impoverished as he was a week ago, but he has reclaimed his soul. So what does this all mean for the conclusion? Well, the next morning, the Thakur's house is in an uproar once again. But this time it's tears of absolute joy. Thakur Sahib enthusiastically announces that the jewelry has reappeared out of nowhere.
And he has a theory about how.
He does. Because the Thakur had been performing a special, elaborate religious ritual to recover the stolen goods, he immediately assumes the gods have magically returned the jewels. He throws his hands up and calls it a chamatkar, a miracle.
And Prakash.
Prakash just stands there, smiles quietly, and agrees that yes, it must be the immense power of the religious ritual.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we uncover the layered genius of the story's title. The miracle that Premchand is highlighting wasn't the religious ritual at all. The true miracle was the awakening of a human conscience.
That's powerful.
Think about the reality of his situation. Here is a man who successfully committed a major crime. He pulled it off. He had the wealth in his hands. It was completely untraceable, and the police had no leads. Yet he voluntarily gave it back.
Because he couldn't live with himself.
Exactly. In a society that is so often driven by relentless greed and the pursuit of status, a human being actively choosing their morality over guaranteed, risk-free wealth is the ultimate miracle.
It's a profound statement on human nature, and the resolution of the story brings it all home beautifully. When Prakash goes back to his own house and tells Champa that the jewelry was miraculously found at the Thakur's, she isn't fooled for a single second.
Not for a second.
She knows exactly what he did, and her reaction shifts instantly.
Oh.
All of the coldness and the judgment vanish. She throws her arms around him, hugging him and crying tears of absolute joy.
She gets her husband back.
Exactly. The text specifically notes that she acts as if her lost husband has finally returned to her. She is so overwhelmingly relieved that he chose the path of integrity that she vows to feed 1,000 poor people in celebration.
It is a profound restoration of their relationship. Their material poverty remains entirely unchanged, but the moral rot that was threatening to destroy them from the inside out has been excised. When you evaluate your own life against the backdrop of this story, it's worth examining the invisible boundaries we set for ourselves. We all face moments where cutting a corner, taking advantage of an unguarded situation, or utilizing a clever rationalization seems like the most logical way out of an unfair circumstance.
It's so tempting.
But as Prakash learned through agonizing experience, the heaviest burden a person can ever carry isn't financial hardship. It's a guilty conscience.
It really makes you evaluate the true cost of the things we desire. And I want to leave you with a final lingering question to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive, something we haven't touched on yet. Prakash was essentially saved from his own darkness by Champa's silent moral standard.
That's right.
It makes you wonder, if the people we love most didn't hold us accountable, how many of us would actually return the jewelry box?
That is a fascinating ethical dilemma to sit with.
It really is. Well, that is all the time we have for today's exploration. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Premchand's brilliant work.
Thanks for listening.
Before you go, a final reminder to please subscribe to the Simplified Summary channel. Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. Did Prakash deserve Champa's forgiveness? Let us know what you think. Until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep exploring.